Bismillah wa salatu wa salam ala rasulullah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to another episode of the Middle West podcast. I'm here in dirty London.
Welcome home. Welcome to the best city in the world. It's not a dirty London.
So
it's,
as you can hear, so I'm your host Akiqul Musa, and as you can hear, I'm joined by my co-host Abdul Samir.
Assalamu alaikum.
Who's very happy because we're in his homeland of East London today.
Welcome to London. Welcome to Bangladesh. Sorry, London.
Mashallah.
UK.
And we're joined today. So this is part of our election series episode. So we're talking about elections-related topics and mostly addressing questions that have been raised to us. So one of the questions, or one of the series of questions, was how does the UK political system work? And we have a...
Can we maybe, just before we kind of do that, can we maybe one day go through the American politics as well with you?
Very nice, very nice. Why would you go through it with me? We will get a civil servant from America to do it, because today we have a UK civil servant who works for Sajid Javid, although Sajid Javid has left that ministry now. Brother Akiq, assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam wa barakatuh.
Thank you very much for joining us.
Correction, it's Robert Jenrick actually.
Robert Jenrick is your new boss.
He's a minister.
Yes, but I'm just saying it used to be Sajid Javid, he wasn't there when you joined the ministry.
Apparently not.
Okay. So also you've been involved in FOSIS for some time.
I have, yes.
And I think you've kind of followed that gateway of student politics leading to kind of some sort of normal politics, or would you say that's common?
I would say
not common?
It's opened the doors for exploration into wider politics in society. Yes.
Shall I tell you how you find out that question? You ask him what he studied. Because if his studies has got nothing to do with politics, that's how you know yes.
What did you study then?
I studied medical genetics at Queen Mary University.
Medical genetics. Wow.
See, I told you.
Where isn't Queen Mary East London based?
Yeah, it's just down the road.
It's not far from here.
Mashallah.
Yes.
Okay, so this is very much your heartlands as well.
Yes.
Are you Bangladeshi as well?
And when he says as well, it means as well as him.
No.
Of course,
It's making it very clear. I am Pakistani as they come.
Yes, I am, proudly.
Mashallah. Are you from Tower Hamlets?
I am.
One of the conversations I've been having is about Tower Hamlets generally, and basically the big divide in Tower Hamlets as a borough. So you have some very, very rich areas, and very, very rich kind of neighborhoods or areas that generate income for the council. So Canary Wharf comes under the Tower Hamlets borough. Does it not, in terms of tax and things like that?
Because it's got a special status, hasn't it?
I think so. I'm not too sure.
So like Kashmir.
I think there are parts of Tower Hamlets, you're right, are quite affluent, and in fact, I think recently they started a campaign to start for a part of Tower Hamlets to have its own its own parish, but I think that fell. I think there was a lot of campaigning and lobbying.
Parish?
Oh gosh.
Sorry, yeah.
It's basic. So there are parts that generate their own income, that, like you said, are probably a lot more affluent. And so there were particular groups who wanted to sort of create their own sort of borough within the borough, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Makes sense.
However, there's been a lot of campaigning and lobbying by locals and by local parties. I say assume, but I know that the local Labour Party were doing a lot of work in sort of trying to reject the suggestion, and it did fall, I believe. Alhamdulillah. Whether Canary Wharf is part of Tower Hamlets, I actually don't know.
Well, it is part of Tower Hamlets in terms of geographically, but I think people are forgetting, people who live in Canary Wharf are different from people who work in Canary Wharf. A lot of like the rich, affluent kind of people who are there are usually just workers, the bankers. They don't live there. They commute in from whether it be further out of London or whatever or not. And in fact, when you do look at housing within IOD, Isle of Dogs, you do find the typical kind of stories where a lot of social housing, a lot of typical kind of literally if you just go 5 minutes walk straight down from Canada Tower, what people think is called Canary Wharf. Canary Wharf is the area, just being very clear. The actual building with the pyramid on top is called Canada Tower. Sorry, tongue twister.
It's called Illuminati, actually. So I think you mentioned on Parish a little bit. So how does it work from a kind of administrative perspective? So you have parishes that form boroughs, and this is just in London.
You have Tower Hamlets Council, and within that you had groups that wanted to start a parish council, which is a council within the Tower Hamlets Council, but I think it would, I assume, slightly more autonomous.
But are there parish councils in other parts of the UK?
Again, I'm not too sure. Maybe there are. It's not something.
What about cities? Because, for example, you have City of London.
So a lot. I mean, I guess London's more interesting because it doesn't have a City of London council per se.
City of London is a city. It's a city state.
Yeah, but for example, Birmingham doesn't have individual councils inside it, or does it?
I see. No, you're right. Usually
you have Birmingham City Council.
Local authorities wise, London is only...
I think with this particular...
even postcodes, London gets different postcodes for east, west, northwest, etc.
I think with this particular suggestion, it was essentially within the community, have another community, but with the parish council, I think with the one that they tried to establish in Tower Hamlets, didn't necessarily meet the best interests or needs of the wider community. Rather, it was specifically for that particular section of Tower Hamlets, and I think that's probably one of the biggest reasons why it was rejected in council. And also, like, there are, I think, sentiments of division that possibly could have created between, I guess, the more affluent parts of Tower Hamlets and I guess the poorer parts of Tower Hamlets, because obviously it's known that Tower Hamlets is one of the poorest boroughs in London.
But the kind of the mixing is very intentional, and I think it's a very overall probably very positive thing. So even in kind of Kensington, like West London, and where you have Kensington, is it Kensington and Chelsea Council?
Which
is one of the richest ones, but they also try to.
So North Kensington specifically, you find that that borough itself, if you divide it into half, you have the north of the borough, which is one of the most deprived parts of. It'll probably have the lowest GDP of the UK, I think, if I'm correct. At least at the time of Grenfell, and that was like one of the major kind of, one of the major concerns which people had with regards to the whole issue of Grenfell. The way if you split North Kensington Council into half, you have the north of the part of the borough, which is like which would have the lowest GDP. Well, not the lowest GDP, but the lowest or most deprived area. However, the south of the borough, that would have the highest GDP in the whole. Whole world, because of like that's literally where a lot of rich millionaires are living at. So I mean, yeah, you're right. There are lots of, and these kind of areas also. You find that there's a divide in terms of voting behaviour as well. So often or not, you find that these are like the swing kind of councils and stuff, or swing MPs, which kind of I think goes on to the next question. Actually, I have for Akiq. So what is the difference between a council and, like, for example, my local mayor and an MP, for example? So I'm from Bow and Bethnal Green. That's my constituency.
Bow and
Bethnal
Green.
Bow and Bethnal Green. And so my local MP is Rushnara Ali. My local mayor is a fella called John Biggs.
Wait, isn't your mayor London Sadiq Khan? Come on.
No, local mayor.
Okay.
Tower Hamlets.
Is this a specific London thing? Because I don't think I have a local mayor. Not in.
No, exactly. So your local authority mayor is that, basically, yeah.
Okay.
And essentially, okay, so Akiq, you might be able to help us out over here, basically. So yeah,
sure.
I guess what you would say is like, so John Biggs would basically be sitting, or is responsible for my specific local authority, but then Sadiq Khan is like the Amir of all of them, if that makes sense. But anyway, so what is the difference between a local constituency and or your representative?
Because what we're building up to is when you have the elections, you have loads of like council elections, municipality elections, and kind of it goes up to MP.
Is not a word we use in the UK.
No, but it's your local council elections, right?
So local
which
elections,
is essentially
elections.
Well, anyways, I will leave my foreign terms.
So, just to sort of clarify, you're asking what's the difference between like a council and councillors to a member of parliament, right?
Sure.
So, just to clarify, I think with councillors, they're part of a local government that serves the interests of that particular area, whereas a member of parliament is someone, like you said, who takes the interests or concerns of their constituency to Parliament, where you have the ministers, where you have other members of Parliament, potentially even promote, if successful, pass policies and bills for particular issues. I guess if we're looking at specifics, with local governments and local councils in this case, and councillors, they are there to essentially address the needs of their local area. So you got local businesses, schools, services. I wouldn't think that was the case with members of Parliament, or those that represent the local constituencies in Parliament itself, because essentially what they're doing, they take issues within the local constituency and give voice to it on a national level, such as the House of Commons, where it could then be debated or possibly even addressed.
So if I had an issue like housing, okay, there's a lack of affordable housing, or say that there's a lot of vandalism going on in my block of flats, and it's a recurrence. So I wouldn't go to my MP, I would go to my local councillors.
I assume, I don't know how, I'm not too familiar with the functions of generally a council, but I guess if we're talking about Tower Hamlets here, they'll have like a housing officer, I assume, or like someone who deals specifically with that particular area, in that particular area. But bearing in mind that councils are are funded and directly associated or linked to wider government ministers and government sectors. So this would probably fall under the department I work for, which is the Ministry of Housing, Community and Local Government. But yes, I think when it comes to that particular local area, they would be the ones that would help you in this case. But if we're talking about on a wider scale of housing as an issue, then that's something that would be directly, directly be linked to the work that Robert Jenrick is doing as the minister.
And who's your boss?
Well, he's boss.
There's boss's boss. So under me, you've got the director, and then under the directors, you've got like these G7s, G6. It's a system, hierarchical system.
So how okay, we're gonna go off on a tangent for a minute. How do you get into politics with not politics, but civil service with a degree in biogenetics,
medical genetics?
I mean, it's really weird. I never really had an interest in politics before university or even my first year. It's just I was politicized. I know that's a buzzword people like to use. From my perspective, it was the case where I saw that there was a genuine disparity between how my community was being treated in comparison to our non-Muslim counterparts.
And do you I guess one of the kind of primary questions that comes in is diversity in your workplace. So how many other, not necessarily Bengali, but BME kind of people do you see in
terms of people of color in my department?
Very PC on this PC.
In my particular department, probably two. There are actually,
including yourself,
including myself, three. There are two other Indian guys.
So essentially, it's very low representation.
I don't think so, because there's been a big drive for POC sort of POC
people of color recruitment.
POC in recruitment, yeah, because obviously you want to ensure that this area of work or the civil service is reflective of its nation, and for it to be able to do that, you need to ensure that
diversity is represented.
Exactly, have a diverse group of people that reflective of our current
did you
society.
Apply direct into like a grad scheme, and for that you can do any degree?
I did something called the SDIP, the Summer Diversity Internship Program. And that is essentially a 3-month internship, 3-month internship with the civil service, a bit like the fast stream, but like a sort of taster. And
what's the fast stream? Sorry.
Oh, so the fast stream is a graduate scheme that you apply for, which basically puts you into civil service.
And you can do that with any degree, or do you not even need a degree?
No. I think you need it. That's the whole point of a graduate scheme. You need an undergraduate degree. I would assume so. I mean, I applied with a science degree, so
yeah. Okay. Okay. Well, I guess that's something that if there's any of our listeners who are interested in jumping over into the civil service?
I highly encourage it, honestly.
Does it pay a lot? Let's be honest.
I don't think... I'm sure you've been told that it's not very polite to ask someone how much they earn, especially if we don't know them very well.
Getting told. Dakhib's getting told.
I'm just asking for the listeners.
Honestly, like on a seriously speaking, I think I would highly encourage people, especially from our community, to get into the civil service if you want to understand how policy works. Like, if you're not happy with policy and you want to understand why certain ministers come to decisions, why even our prime minister comes to certain policy decisions, like, what this does is gives you an understanding on how policy is created based on actual analytics and research. And then obviously decisions are made by those above us based on, I guess, certain political objectives. But I think it's fascinating, and I definitely encourage it from people in our community, especially those that are interested in politics, but not necessarily party politics itself.
Yeah. So you mentioned, for example, or you kind of clarified that when it comes to local issues, that's where we have our local authorities. So issues to do with, communities, schools, whatever or not. When it comes to like national kind of issues, our MPs, our local MPs are there to represent our opinions, I guess. So, for example, on a level of government, basically, they kind of give their 2 pence. That's supposed to be, I guess, reflective of what the constituency is doing. So you mentioned House of Commons, for example. So you have Parliament, essentially, which is made up of House of Commons and House of Lords. Who sits on both of them? And then who are civil servants, basically? Like, so yourself, I know you mentioned you're a civil servant.
Also, what is with this archaic terminology? House of Commons, House of... No, I am not a common. All right, like, at the moment, I'm not even a common, but, like, what is this House of Commons, House of Lord, weird, hierarchical, old school? Where does this come from? Why don't we change it?
I would say the biggest difference between the House of Lords and House of Commons is the House of Lords people are selected to be a part of, whereas the House of Commons is very much democratically elected members who are put in. The House of Commons having a fixed number.
So in House of in America, you know how you have Congress and Senate. Is it similar to that? In terms or are they similar?
Again, I'm not too familiar with American politics, so I'm not too sure. But
no, but actually, for them, they're all elected, but just in a different way. And also, I just find it's very interesting in Britain how it seems very reminiscent of the old days where, they have the titles and they're the lords and lifelong peers and things like that. So if you have a nomination into the House of Lords, you're there for life, and you are basically you are getting a huge amount of government money for life, for basically sitting around, and the attendance in the House of Lords is shocking, and I think one of the things that puts a lot of people off completely government and disengages them is you see these predominantly white people who are all and I like, when I don't predominantly, I don't say like more than 50% because that would make sense. It's a like kind of overwhelming majority, not even reflective of the populace, who kind of sit around, get a lot of public money for no reason.
I mean, I think it really depends. So what you'd have to do is question the actual selection process then.
So what is the selection process?
In terms with specifically the House of Lords, I think it's done by the monarch in consultation with the Prime Minister, and I believe they have like a separate department for it. I'm not. I think it's the Lords Appointment Commission.
Why is John Bercow not getting it?
Again, that's really dependent. So, based on the advice that the Lords Appointment Commission, I believe that's what they call it, I may be wrong, Boris Johnson, who's the current Prime Minister, or maybe not.
So, is it as simple as the Prime Minister can appoint whoever they want to, as long as they
make recommendations to the monarch.
So if there's an MP that's like their boy, like there was a rumor that Nigel Farage for Brexit Party standing down against the Conservatives, he was promised to be made a peer or a lord.
Again, that would depend on the
but
individuals and bodies.
Can Boris do that?
I mean, there'd have to be valid reasons.
Doesn't that sound really corrupt?
Based on the advice, I guess so, but I wouldn't think they would do something like that.
Is British government a sham and it's not really a democracy?
I'm not saying that at all. I think we have one of the best democracies in the world, to be fair. But the House of Lords, we have to also clarify, like when we talk about a democracy, predominantly it takes place in the House of Commons, where we have elected members of Parliament. The House of Lords have very little power, other than the fact they can scrutinise bills that pass the House of Commons, and to some extent reject bills. However, they cannot make, and they can make amendments, but they cannot create bills or pass bills directly themselves.
So, yeah.
And can I just clarify also, it's very rare that if something passes in the House of Commons, that it will get rejected in the House of Lords. Very rare.
So, very quickly, because again, so many buzzwords that have been thrown around.
Sure.
So, you threw around, again, the houses, you threw around the word bills and stuff.
Yeah.
So, like, essentially, what is the function of each house? And I guess, how does it work? So, what is a bill and what happens to it before it becomes law?
Okay. So there are a few processes. So first, if the bill itself is basically something that's proposed by an MP or a group of MPs, it is then presented at Parliament, where it is debated.
So House of Commons.
The House of Commons, for those that might know, is basically where all the MPs gather to discuss and debate issues and policies. So that's where it's first taken, it's suggested, it's debated, discussed, and then once you've had that discussion, I'm talking very simple terms here, by the way, it is then voted on. And that is then announced by the Speaker of the House, which is essentially the chair. And if it gets a parliamentary majority from the members of Parliament that sit in the House of Commons, it then goes to the House of Lords. Now, once it goes to the House of Lords, it can be, and again, I say this, it can be scrutinised, which it is.
It's very rarely rejected.
Very rarely rejected. So it goes to the House of Lords, they discuss it further. It can be, like I said, it gets scrutinised, but very rarely rejected. And then once it passes in the House of Lords, it then gets royal assent, which essentially establishes it as part of policy.
But again, in the past 400 years, we've very rarely seen any royal or any monarch reject anything that's passed both houses.
I mean, the fact that you've got a prorogation of Parliament based on the Prime Minister's advice would suggest that it's very rare. The monarch usually takes the advice of the Prime Minister.
The monarch just does whatever they're told to do.
Any democratic process that takes place, and if it has that legitimacy of the democratic process, then I don't see why it should be rejected.
Okay.
I guess one question is, why do you think this is the case? Like, what would happen, for example? Imagine one day the Queen just thought of going rogue and just says no. Would there be kind of what would be the
abolish the monarchy?
I mean, I'm sure people would want to sort of create such movements. Honestly speaking, I don't know. I can't envisage something like that even happening. This
is very interesting because I find it so, like, I find it just kind of mind-boggling that none of this is written down. Correct me if I'm wrong. This is not written down. This is just convention, right? That dictates that things happen like this.
I honestly speaking, I actually don't know if it's as part of the constitution of.
I thought we didn't. Do we even have a constitution?
With regards to the process, are we again? I need to clarify. Are we speaking about like policies and how policies are passed?
No, I mean in terms of the way the houses and the executive and the legislative arms of government interact with each other.
Oh, that's a very good question. I don't know.
So my understanding is that we don't have a constitution. It's just practices that are known and established. And we refer back to those practices as if though like...
Such a British thing. It's like queuing. Nobody has the rules of queuing, but everybody follows them in the same way.
Like an example, I assume an
what
example...
a bizarre country. Everyone just does the right thing.
I assume an example would be like the Queen's speech. So that's not that's just a common practice, but not something that's as part of our law.
So the Queen's speech is when... Because I know we had a lot of kind of discussion around that, and we never covered it in an episode formally, where... The Queen's speech and the prorogation of Parliament. So the Parliament was suspended because when you have a Queen's speech, which is when the government tells her what to say for a new programme.
Yes.
So she's basically saying what the government's going to do in the next session. Okay, so bringing everything we've talked about together. So the way government works, you've got local councils who decide on local issues, and they usually talk about kind of local housing and how it's allocated and how housing.
I mean, not just local housing. Come
no,
on,
but also like local traffic regulations,
like services, like our education services,
roads,
schools and stuff come under their purview as well.
Fix up the roads, get rid of cycle lanes.
Okay, so cycle lanes, all of that.
They play a huge part.
The government bit, which we very much interact with on a day-to-day basis.
So they apply. So what councils do is, I think they can apply for like grants from the government, because at the end of the day, councils are still put under the government.
Yes,
so
yes.
They're not separate from them. So like they apply for grants, funding from the government. So that's, and I think I sort of alluded to that sort of link.
They have to operate within the laws which are passed by House of Commons and agreed by House of Lords, which we have no, like we don't elect them, but they almost always agree with House of Commons. I'm just trying to kind of get a basic understanding for our listeners.
So if we're trying to create a picture of how we perceive the function of the House of Lords and its importance
of the whole,
of everything,
of how everything relates to each other, and because we're voting right now only for the House of Commons. We had some elections, I think, a few months ago, or my internal time clock might be completely wrong, for council elections where everyone voted on their councillors, and those councillors, they operate, as you said, very locally within the local council. Do you think as a kind of, and maybe this is for yourself as well, is that if you want to bring change to your community and you feel that you really want to be part of serving the local community, do you think people have more authority and more ability to bring change, not necessarily authority, but more ability to bring change as running as local councillors, or do you think it's as an MP one can bring real change? Because of course,
I mean, why are we reducing change to two particular positions? If you want to bring change, you raise it, you organise.
So how?
If something is important
Where?
to you, because I don't think I think yes, the political process is very, very important, and within, I guess, the UK specifically, it has a lot of weight because of the exposure and the importance of the responsibility as a member of council or a member of parliament. But if you want to create change, you can start anywhere. Literally, get a group of people together. You can write to.
I thought he was going to say pick up trash. Loads of branches.
No, but like seriously speaking, why are we reducing organising? Or I say organising, that's just a method. Why are we reducing change to two particular pathways, which are very parliamentary? Very like party politically orientated. You don't have to be part of a political party to create change. If you believe in something enough, then you utilize the resources around you to create awareness, and then from that awareness you gather more people and you organize with those people, and then from that then you can push your movement or push your cause in a way where you can get people who are stakeholders or who can create the change for you, whether it's through policy or whether it's through creating initiatives.
Why don't you get into those positions where you can make, you just said you go to the people who can make the change for you. Why don't you become the people
How do we know that's not already happening? Like I'm
not saying it's not happening. I'm saying if someone's out there listening and they want to drive the change, what do you? Because I've heard a lot of criticisms of people of government who just say that this is all. Well,
what's the point in voting, kind of thing?
But I think there's a very basic premise here. So the people that we elect in the House of Parliament, the members. So you're, like you said, Rashna Ali. Does she not represent you? Exactly.
By definition, yes.
And so therefore, if there was an issue that you believed in that required change, apologies for the buzzwords, and you created a big enough movement for that change, do you not think she would have to listen to you and take that issue to the Houses of Parliament?
If, for example, I managed to mobilise in a way where it kind of appeals to her as well, then I see why not.
This is where I disagree, because at the end of the day, it's not about her. She was elected. Her mandate is based upon...
Yeah, but what can you do if she just says, "Nah, I don't feel like it"?
Then you have the means to challenge her and hold her to account.
Your MP is Russian early, so sounds like a Muslim name. But what if you have like you're in one of those areas where you have like this hardcore conservative MP, and or not to malign the conservative, could be any party, anyone who just doesn't like you, doesn't like the Muslims, and they just, whatever party they are, they just don't like you, and they just say, this guy's stupid and I don't want to listen.
I mean,
what can you do?
Regardless of what political party, whether it's the Tories, whether it's Labour, the Green Party, or the Liberal Democrats, again, if you're not happy with something that your MP is doing, you raise it. I'm sure they have surgeries, and they have like local party meetings. I believe they're called COP meetings, with the Labour specifically, because they're quite strong in Tower Hamlets. You raise it and you create, again, like I said, because at the end of the day, their mandate is to represent you. So if you're not happy with that, then you voice that concern, whether it's to the different, again, I don't know how it works specifically Tower Hamlets. I don't really engage with the politics here as much because I have my reasons. I think but there are platforms, and like I said, and I don't say it loosely when I say that we have one of the best democracies in the world, is that there are platforms where you could raise those concerns, and if your local member of parliament isn't representing you adequately, then they have no choice but to listen to you. Why? Because you are someone who elected them into that position.
Because that's why I kind of gave the initial answer that I gave. Because essentially, I think that of course, people are different, and likewise, MPs are different. Some MPs might be people who sympathise with your cause, and you don't need to kind of have much of a hard, it wouldn't be as much effort that you need to put into convincing them. But then there are other MPs that essentially every single MP's interest would be re-election. So, for example, if I manage to mobilize people for a certain change that I want to, in a way where I'm able to gather enough people who are registered to vote, and then I can just basically look, I've got the numbers for it. These are people who may not vote for you if you don't vote for this change. Is that something that's, for example, that's going to work? I don't know if that made sense there.
So are we suggesting that MPs are essentially going to do whatever gets them elected? Or is it?
Yes, that's what we're suggesting. Okay. Well, I'm suggesting that anyway.
Well, then I would say that's a completely wrong mentality to have, because I think, personally speaking, you have some phenomenal MPs who are very much in tune with the people that they represent. And then you might, I don't know, but you might have MPs who very much think like what you've just suggested, Thaqib. And if that's the case, then, as I said, use the platforms that exist to, in my opinion, expose that. Because at the end of the day, when you're electing someone into any position, whether it's the council, your local council as a councillor for your local area, or for a member of parliament for your local constituency, then surely you'd want to ensure that the person who you're putting into power or a position of high authority is someone that's going to represent your interests and not their own political agenda.
So you also mentioned earlier on, by the way, about you're encouraging people to get involved in civil service, and you're also saying it's a place where policies, I guess, are created or something like that, and
the process of policy inception, I guess.
Sorry.
Sorry, more buzzwords.
So where do civil servants fit in this whole thing? And so why did you essentially tell people to run for policy?
So civil servants have to be impartial. I have to be impartial, because at the end of the day, I'll be working.
So what is the job of a civil servant? What is there
are different. I guess there are different areas of work that civil servants go into. Like there's comms, there's data analysis. I think there's project management. There's it's so diverse, and there's so many departments as well. Like you've got DEFRA, you've got BAYS, you've got the Ministry of Housing, Community and Local Government, you've got the Foreign and Commonwealth Office. So there are different types of work. I can't sit here and say, oh yeah, this, because I actually don't know everything.
From a general point of view. So as in we're putting together the picture. We've figured out what the Palace of Westminster does exactly.
Sure.
We've managed to figure out what our local authorities do.
So you work in the Palace of Westminster?
I don't know.
Minster. Oh, okay.
I work in the buildings around it.
So exactly. So in the buildings that are around it, you have things called civil servants. Yeah. So what is the
things?
Wow.
But so essentially, do you produce like white papers and then ministers decide from that? And
I mean, that really depends, because you've got, like I said, it's a hierarchical structure. We just do one particular type of job. I guess what my specific role, that's all I could really sort of elaborate on. It's mainly comms work. So yes, that would be not necessarily white papers, but would be to collate and look at briefing papers, look at data. Based on that, create briefings, possibly coordinate meetings between ministers, directors, and supervisors. But there are, again, that is just part of the process. There are many different elements to it, like the research itself, people who scrutinize the data, people who then come up with the different options and alternatives that we as society, I talk about the UK specifically, can go towards, which is then presented to said ministers, who then decide what the best option is for the UK according to them, and I guess the political agendas that they have for their party and the
ministers, we're not talking about MPs. Ministers, are we talking about specifically government?
So yes, but we also have to, I have to clarify that ministers are also sitting MPs too. So they represent the local constituencies, but as part of the government and as appointed by the Prime Minister, they have added responsibility.
Okay, right. So I know you need to go. I have a lot more questions for you about history of the Labour Party and things like that, but hopefully we'll have you again on. And I really appreciate you coming on, especially with the onset of cough and things like that. And
I think you literally developed the cough just so you could avoid us.
Oh, maybe.
Yeah,
It's okay. I'll dettol the mic before we use it. But last question for you: do you think Muslims, as a kind of general kind of faith group, so all the Muslim kind of various ethnic communities mostly, do you think we're engaged sufficiently with politics? Do you think we're represented sufficiently? And if not, why not?
Okay. So there's quite a few things to unpack, because I think there's a few questions within that one question you've asked. I'll start with representation. I do not believe we're represented. I believe we're severely underrepresented. With regards to engagement itself, I highly encourage our community to get involved in any democratic procedure that's relevant to them, and also that impacts them both on the local and national level. And I think the best way to do that is ensure that your voice is heard, that your interests are being met, whether it's the local elections, whether it's your local council, or whether it's even in your local institutions. I think it's sad that we don't really get to talk about the work that we do on a student level, because I think that sort of orientates itself and creates a pathway to engage in wider politics in, I guess, the context of the UK at least. So I think even within an institutional level, with their student unions, the NUS, even within the workplace, use the democratic procedures and the structures that are available to you to ensure that your voice is heard and that your interests and the interests of your community are being met. And that's, I guess, if you really want to promote a society that's plural, that's diverse, then surely you as an individual have a duty upon yourself to ensure that your community is represented.
All right.
Can you imagine if Asad was here, how this conversation would have gone?
It would be very interesting, because there's a lot of other kind of aspects of it, and that we can always touch on. We talked about it a little bit in our last episode about kind of a lot of people don't vote in democracy for fiqhi reasons and things like that. But that's a conversation for another day. So thank you very much. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter at the Middle West PC. You can listen to us on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. Really appreciate you coming in today. And you guys can write to us on middlewestpc@gmail.com or reach out on any of the other platforms to give us feedback, what you want to hear about, and what future topics, guests, etc. we can have. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum.